Well, let's talk about those debates now, because the second of two took place last night, again in Montreal, this time around in English. CPAC's Andrew Thomson was there. He's here to talk about some of the highlights, maybe the lowlights. Andrew, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Michael.
So, as we said off top, Donald Trump is forcing this country to examine a number of agreements, security arrangements made. So not surprisingly, Donald Trump does figure into last night's debate. Tell us about what you heard.
Well, in fact, the U.S. president was dominating the first 40 minutes. The candidates promising a tough response to potential tariffs and threats to Canadian sovereignty, and talking about why they're the right leader to be dealing with Trump. Here's some of what we heard on that question.
Part of the way to deal with this situation is to do what we should have been doing and what we need to do as a country, which is to build a strong economy.
Trump represents the biggest threat our country has seen since the Second World War. I have recognized that from the outset. I've built my campaign on a plan to answer that threat.
We are a proud, sovereign country, and as Canadians, we have so much to offer, but also the Americans depend on us. And you can't bring a calculator to a knife fight. You have to fight very strongly and with the right tools.
Mr. Trump is a bully, and you do not give 1 inch to a bully. In that case, we cannot be learning this on the job. That's where I come in.
And those are just some of the sampling of the answers we got to the question as to how they would deal with Donald Trump. Although, he, as you said, Andrew, he figured quite largely in last night's debate. One name, one person who did not figure largely until the end is Justin Trudeau, because at the end there was a very direct question about the outgoing Prime Minister. Tell us about that.
Right. The candidates were asked, how would you differentiate yourself from Mr. Trudeau? Now, this was a chance for the candidates to put some room between themselves and the man they want to replace. And here we heard more about leadership style. Let's have a look.
I'm much more hands-on. Much more of a hands-on person, hands-on manager. I focus on results and getting things done.
For me, this campaign has been a personal liberation. And I am my own person, and it is great. I personally do not believe in a style of leadership, which is a one-man band.
Where I will differentiate myself greatly is that I'll be focused much more on the economy. I'll be focused on creating wealth. I'll be focused on getting more money into Canadians' pockets. That's what I'm good at.
Where I see a big difference is in making sure that we stay and I stay connected to the grassroots. And this is something that as Liberals, I want to talk to you specifically about. We need to hear your voices. We need to hear your ideas.
And Michael, the leadership is now in the hands of those grassroots Liberals who are eligible to vote. They have until next Sunday.
Okay, Andrew, thank you for that. Our Andrew Thomson. Well, let's continue the conversation now with Susan Smith, former Liberal strategist, now principal and co-founder of Blue Sky Strategy Group. Jordan Paquet, a former Conservative strategist, also now vice president with the same company. And George Soule, former director of communications for the NDP, currently managing a local campaign in the Ontario election. Voting day tomorrow, right, George? Hello to the three of you.
Hello. Hi, Michael.
So listen, I'm going to start out there with the last question I had with Andrew, and really the last question of last night's debate. The moderator, Hannah Thibodeau, asking the four hopefuls how they would distinguish themselves from the Prime Minister. And you had Mark Carney say that he would focus more on the economy, would consult more. Chrystia Freeland saying that she was now her own person, although she did try to avoid the question to begin with. Karina Gould said she would listen more to the grassroots. Mr. Bayless saying he would focus more on economic growth. Is that enough to distinguish themselves, given the fact that Justin Trudeau's numbers are so unpopular right now with Canadians, Susan?
I don't actually think that's going to be the ballot question anymore. I think the ballot question is going to be who's best to stand up to Trump, and that's why you've seen the Liberal numbers change so much. I think Canadians are kind of over Trudeau. They were mad at him. And he was around for a long time. It inevitably happens in Canadian politics, but he stepped aside. And because he's out of the equation and there are other contenders, most notably Mr. Carney, we're seeing a near evenness in the polls right now. So I think the ballot question will not, in fact, be why are you not Justin Trudeau? It will be who is best to stand up to Donald Trump and who is best to manage the Canadian economy in the coming turmoil that we know we're going to face living next door to a Trump administration.
Okay, Jordan, what do you say to that? Because I've heard Conservatives say time and again, well, this person was in the cabinet, this person was in the cabinet, this person advised. What do you say to that?
Yeah, and Mark Carney was the top economic advisor for Justin Trudeau over the last 5 years. So I know the Liberals are going to want to try and run as far as they can from Justin Trudeau on his record, but they were right there in the center of it over the last 9 years. And that's what the Conservatives are going to do over the next couple of months as we lead into a general election, is to really make that stick. These individuals, they say they want to go and stand up to Donald Trump. They couldn't even stand up to Justin Trudeau over the last couple of years if they're going to talk about those policies that they're trying to run from now. It's been Pierre Poilievre that's been putting those new ideas in the window for the last couple of years, and now they're just trying to catch up right now. Yeah, the last 2 years. No, I mean he's been talking about housing strategies, breaking down interprovincial trade barriers,
no, he hasn't.
getting rid
He's
of
been talking about exit
taxes.
tax. He's had one T-shirt.
Yeah, and he had a big policy platform that he rolled out a couple of weeks ago as well.
So 10
and now that
minutes
they're
ago.
trying to catch up. No, this has been going on for 2 years.
Okay, George, what do you say? Did they distinguish themselves enough from what is right now an unpopular prime minister?
Well, I think the answer is actually kind of no, they didn't, but it also doesn't matter. So, I think to both the points that my colleagues were bringing up, I think that it's, they're indistinguishable from Justin Trudeau as far as the connection they have over the last number of years. But I actually agree with Susan that won't be the ballot question. And it's enough that it's not Justin Trudeau not that he's on the ballot, but it's not on the side of the plane, I think will be a big change. And I think what's going to be the question is going to be, who is best going to be able to get us through this stuff. If it's who can argue with Donald Trump, that's one thing. But I think it's also, as I've said before, who's actually going to support people, when the tariffs do come, because we know no matter what we negotiate, they're coming anyway. So I think that's the opportunity for the NDP. I think, Mark Carney is going to get hit hard by the Conservatives. I think, people should remember that Mark Carney also was handpicked as an advisor from Stephen Harper. So, is that guy somebody who understands the lives we've led? I don't think so. And I think that Pierre Poilievre's also struggled with that. So I think we'll see how that goes forward. But I don't think that the question is going to be how close were you to Justin Trudeau. Okay,
you say Mark Carney is going to get hammered hard, and Carney still is the perceived front runner in this race. We'll know for certain in a couple of weeks' time. But here you have a fairly easy debate amongst the four, fairly collegial debate amongst the four. And Mark Carney, of the four, is the only one that has never ran in a campaign, never sat in the House of Commons. Has he been vetted enough? Has he proven that he can actually take in, the thrust and parry of what political debate is? And this campaign is expected to be a nasty one.
So a couple things. Mark Carney has been the governor of the Bank of Canada and the governor of the Bank of England. He's sat and done press conferences about the economy. He's participated in global forums. He has not been in the House of Commons. That's correct. But Canadians complain a lot about what goes on in the House of Commons. If I was Mark Carney's team, and I would say to him that his opening statement should be in the debate once he wins and he's up against Mr. Poilievre, would say, "Hi, I'm Mark Carney. I was born in the Northwest Territories. I grew up in Edmonton. I'm an economist. I'm not a career politician. And for better or for worse, I don't speak in slogans, but I understand how the economy works. I understand how to put a government together. I understand how to run a government, and I can stand up to Mr. Trump. And I don't spend my time thinking about a soundbite and how to shout over people in the House of Commons. I think that's going to be quite refreshing for people. I think he might need to remind a few people that that's not who he is and that's not how he rolls. But if we've been listening to Canadians for a long time, they think question period and the shenanigans that goes on in there is like kindergarten, worse than kindergarten, and we need some decorum, and we certainly we need to go toe-to-toe with Trump on tariffs, but we don't need to go toe-to-toe with Trump on slogans and grandstanding. We need smart economic management, and I think that's what Carney will put forward for Canadians to choose.
Okay, nice alliteration. Toe-to-toe with Trump. So what do you think, Jordan, whether or not Mark Carney has proven himself capable enough or has been tested enough for the role that it looks like he's going to inherit?
So, and in your preamble too, Michael, you said, has he been vetted enough? And to me, that's going to be part of his Achilles heel going forward if he's not able to answer some of these questions about asset disclosure about what his role was at Brookfield in taking that company down to the U.S. and putting it in the headquarters down there. He gave an answer last night, fine, but then Conservatives were out pressing on it today, showing a letter where he, as chair of the board, said this decision is unanimous from there. He's going to have to do these asset disclosures going forward. He said it would be in his interest to do it quickly so that there won't be these questions hanging over him going forward.
He did say last night in the debate that he's already signed the paperwork for his security clearance. And Mr. Poilievre's had trouble. Well, that's pretty important, I think, for the national security
as well. So I mean,
but he won't
also
take
had
the briefing. He won't do the clearance.
Well, he doesn't need to get a PCO briefing to
but to the vetting process and be able to fight the fight.
Something that will stick with Canadians. And Carney, yes, they know who he is as a name, but they don't know who he actually is as a person, what he did at different companies and whatnot. And it's not to say there's anything nefarious there, but the longer he refuses to answer and actually put his assets out there on the table for Canadians to see, to make sure he's completely above board in any conflict of interest laws, which this previous Liberal government has had issues with, that's going to be a question out there, and it could be his Achilles heel.
George, what do you think? Because I think a political party would want to have the belief that their leader is well tested and can carry the fight. Has Mark Carney proven that he can do that?
Well, it is sort of a surreal reality of our democracy that somebody who has never run in an election at all could become our prime minister. So I think that in itself is going to be an interesting thing for Canadians to recognize and learn about. As far as being tested, he hasn't really. I think it's interesting, though, for the Conservatives to be bringing up his past because, I don't think Pierre Poilievre wants to talk too much about his either. His entire life spent in Parliament and his voting record against workers, against choice, against equal marriage, on and on and on. These are things that Pierre Poilievre is trying to deny about his past. So that's going to be a challenge for him, I think, as he tries to dig in the history books. And again, I think it's just going to come down to how people feel. More and more politics is about feeling and feeling connected to someone. I'm not sure, and with due respect to Susan, I'm not sure. Don't worry, I'm an economist is the best message to connect with folks at home. But I do think that's going to be an interesting path for both the Conservatives as they try to attack, but also for Carney to try to appear to be like the rest of us.
It wasn't, don't worry, I'm an economist. It was, I'm not a snappy speaker because I'm an economist.
Clarification from Susan Smith.
Yes. Okay. With all due respect to all the economists, speaking English when you're an economist is tough. Clear, comprehensible stuff. I actually think Mark Carney does a good job of translating the complex economic stuff to kitchen table issues for Canadians, but he doesn't do slogans like Poilievre does.
Okay, well, I'm sorry to say, I'm a journalist. We ran out of time. Susan, Jordan, George, thank you for that.